Good morning, everyone. This is Robin West from Zebra Technologies, giving a dev talk today on using the Zebra LinkOS multi-platform SDK to do printing from a PC using .NET. So I hope you all enjoy this wonderful conversation and get some good knowledge out of it. So I'm going to get started in let you guys know what's going on. If you didn't know, very recently we did release an update to the LinkOS multi-platform SDK, and within that new update, we have a .NET SDK portion to it, which allows you to write applications on the PC for Windows 7, 8, and 10. With .NET. You could do it with the Java SDK before this, but we know that a lot of PC developers actually prefer .NET, so that's why we came out with this particular product. The download for the multi-platform SDK is at zebra.com/SDK. For developer support and just general information and knowledge and content, and basically sort of your go-to stop for support around the SDKs and development for printing from Zebra, the developer.zebra.com/print page, and then the API docs, which are linked on the developer page, but the API docs and sample code are on Tech Docs and GitHub respectively. So I'm gonna kill the slideshow because no one likes slideshows. This is the page for the printers on the developer portal, and on here there's a bunch of different links, everything from best practices, EPL guides, API documents, that kind of thing. And those link over here to the multi-platform SDK page on our Tech Docs portal. So to get started, you're going to want to go to the zebra.com/SDK page and download the new SDK. On it, you will get a whole bunch of other SDKs for different platforms with it, but the PCNet is the one we're going to be talking about today. Once you have downloaded and installed it onto your machine, there's a couple of different things that you're going to want to do in order to use it in your project. But let's get a project started just so you can kind of see where starting from. We're going to go ahead and start up a new Visual Studio project. This time I'm going to do a WPF app. This particular library will work with console apps, different PC-based applications. It will not work with UWP apps, but we're hoping that someday in the future that they'll be able to support that. But the main reason for that is that they wanted to be able to support both Windows 7, 8, and 10, not just 10. So the library is not UWP compliant. So we're going to go here with a WPF app and get a new one started here. So I got this wonderful, wonderful project started up here, very blank, very nothing in here. And a couple things to get you started with actually using the SDK within it. I'm gonna refresh that. So I've got my wonderful app up here, and this is where I installed the LinkOS SDK, multi-platform SDK. When you install it, you'll notice that there are a bunch of different folders in here. The PCNet is the one we're looking at. Version, and then the lib folder is the one we're going to want to pull. So I'm going to pop that open. I'm going to go into my app, create a nice little lib folder in here, just to make it easier to keep everything together. I'm going to grab all of the files in here and drop it into my lib folder for my project. All right, wonderful. So I'm going to close those guys out. And then in my solution, I'm going to add a few references. Browse in here and going to go to my new project, lib folder, and I'm going to pull in the SDK API DLLs as references. The rest of these are just referenced essentially within these DLLs, but the only ones that you actually have to pull in really are these three. I'm going to add them in and go from there. All right, wonderful. And the last thing that I'm going to want to do is I'm going to go ahead and change my target framework to 4.7. The SDK was compiled on it, so Visual Studio is kind of doesn't necessarily like it when you are using multiple different versions, especially when you're using a newer one in the library. So I'm just going to make it easier and convert my app to framework 4.7. All right, now it's time I can actually get started with some programming. Are there any questions so far, Stacy? Nope. Okay, wonderful. So now that I have everything loaded up into my project, I can do a little bit of work here. I'm going to create a little window. I'm going to drop in, let's put in a nice label and name it IP address. And I'm going to add a text box. It's not going to work. And for this one, I'm just going to hard code in my IP address of my printer, just because I know what it is. Obviously, you're not always going to know what your customer's IP addresses are, but this, for demonstration purposes, I'm just going to throw it in there, and I'm going to add a nice little button. Wonderful. Print. Print. Okay. So now that I have my wonderful window ready to go, and it's all saved off, now go ahead and start a button click method. Within that, I'm going to add a couple things. I'm going to basically try and grab the address out of that text box, and going to use that to send the ZPL over TCP. In order to get this particular function, I'm going to go back to my TechTalks page and under pc.net, and going to print over TCP IP. And in here, there are a couple of code samples, and I'm just going to grab this particular one out of the documentation and pop it into my application. All right. So we're going to have to add a couple of references, primarily just the com class in there. That should be enough. And let's try to run this and see how it works. You notice at the bottom I have a video going of my printer sitting next to me here. All right, let's. Oh, it would be nice if the printer was actually turned on. Give me a sec. Gotta love live demos when you forget to do simple things like turn on your printer. All right. Notice one thing already though, our particular application here, there's no real error checking involved, and I'm going to show you how to do some of that as we go through this. But obviously it didn't catch that particular major issue that the printer was already off. So I'll show you some code on how to catch some of those different types of problems, but this is some, just wanted to get you started. with really, really quick how to do it, and then I'll go into some of the a little bit more how-tos as far as that goes, and make sure the IP is the same. Okay, good. And now I'm going to go ahead and print again. And it says very tiny there, this is a ZPL test, which if you can read ZPL, you notice is the line that is in the ZPL here on our example. So very easy, you know, a couple of lines here and we were able to get the printer printing. So basically all this is doing is opening up a TCP connection directly. In the try-catch, gonna open that connection up, send the ZPL in here as byte data, and then essentially close the connection. Super simple, nothing too crazy, but also no error checking or anything of that sort. So good for, you know, small things, but I would not recommend this particular code as part of your production system. So what I'm going to do is I have created some, what I call a print helper class, which I will give the code to everyone after this particular session, but we'll go through it a little bit while we're here. But I'm going to copy that in and add it to my project like this. It'd be good if I actually stopped it. All right. And I'll go through this code with you, but wanted to throw it in here to make it a little easier. And what I'm going to do is add a couple of the references that we need. Make sure we've got everything. All right, that looked like that covered those. And I'm going to add a new function to my project that does a little bit more of what we call the best practices printing, which is doing a lot of the status checking, doing things like verifying that the page language is set up correctly, and that kind of thing. Let me show you real quick how it looks, and then we will. Then I'll go through the code so you can see what it is that I'm doing. I'm going to change this line here to make that await and make this async, because we're going to run some different threads here for best practices. So do that and go ahead and start our project again. All right, so this time it just printed out hello world. If I pop open the print head, keep an eye on the output down here at the bottom of the screen. And I'm going to hit print. It says cannot print because the printer head is open, printer is disconnected. So basically this is allowing you to give some sort of feedback to your users to say, hey, something's wrong with the printer, you should probably fix it. So things like paper outs, different heating elements going bad, whatever, even print head being open, you can get those types of different statuses and show them to your users. We've gone over a lot of this stuff in some of our previous sessions, but I thought it'd be good to show you it on here. Let's run through the code though, just so you can see how we're doing this. Anyone who's been to and seen some of our Android sessions or Xamarin sessions will recognize a lot of this code. We try to keep as much as possible the APIs as similar as we can across all the different SDKs that we've got. So we have our standard ZPL string saying hello world here. Opening up again the TCP connection, just like we did before. My print helper is going to actually open up the connection, and I'm doing a few things in there which I will show you down here. For our connection is going to open up the connection, verify that it's connected. Once it is, I'm going to grab a Zebra printer instance, just because it's easier to work off the printer object and do a lot of the different functionality, especially when it comes to dealing with multiple different printer languages. Just in case you would like to make sure that when you're writing your application, regardless of the printer that you're using, that you're going to be able to print across all of them. The printer language is an important portion of that. And okay, so we've made the connection, grabbed the Zebra printer object. We're going to set the page language, which again is one of my helper functions here. If you wanted to print in ZPL, then this will handle that. If you want to print in CPCL or line mode, this will also handle those instances. Going to verify that the connection has been opened, set the language, and then grab the language just to verify that it has been set, and that the printer is in the mode that you actually want it to be when you're trying to print. So there's that particular function. And we're over here. Then we're going to check status. Which is here. So basically, the SDK has a function called getCurrentStatus to grab the current status of the printer. And there's a bunch of different status conditions that you can check for. Ready to print is basically the one that says, okay, you're good to go. The other, these are some of the more common issues that can happen. There are other status conditions that you might want to be checking for as well. But these are the common ones that we tend to recommend that you're verifying, just because they happen all the time. We're going to go ahead and then print our ZPL string, check the status after the printing, and then disconnect. So basically the same structure as what we had up here, where we open up the connection, send the data, and then close the connection. But we're doing a few extra things like checking the status and doing stuff with the printer language. So in a lot of ways it's pretty similar, but this actually does a lot more error handling for you. And makes the application far more stable and less likely to run into issues where you hit a button and nothing seems to happen like it did a minute ago when when the printer was off. Having it in the having it in a separate thread means that your main UI thread doesn't get bogged down when you're actually doing printing, and you're not waiting on that for a responsive UI. So common things that are pretty well known. Checking status after does have one small thing that's different from checking status before printing, and that's that checking the number of formats in the receive buffer. That's basically your way of verifying, is it still actually printing something while you're checking the status? So a lot of times it can send the print job, but the printer will take a little bit of time to process and actually print it, longer than the application takes to come back from the saying, I sent it. So once it comes back and says I sent it, you can check the status right away a lot of times and say, hey, what's going on with you? And even if it's still printing, the printer status will actually respond with it is ready to print. But if, say, if you, a little bit later on, if you're printing multiple pages, or if you've got a really long label or really complicated label, it runs out of paper, or something happens in the middle of it. Running out of paper is actually a common thing that will happen. This will give you a way of checking for that particular type of issue where part of the print job got printed, but not all of it. So you got to get an idea that not everything is actually gone through, and be able to handle that by going back to your user and saying, hey, do you want to reprint, fix the error, whatever. So this will give you that sort of feedback that you can verify those kinds of things. And did I do anything special with print here in my print helper? No, just verifying that the connection has been open. Then I write the bytes out, and it's been sent. It will do a try catch in here as well. If the printer does lose its connection at some point, you want to verify that as well. That's why there's try catches actually in most of the communications to the printer, just because if the printer gets turned off or loses its connection for whatever reason, it will throw an exception to the system to let it know that that happened, rather than being a status error that comes back. So that's showing some basic, okay, I'm printing a label. Are there any questions yet? No? Okay, good. And I will be posting this code up on the developer portal on the page where this webinar was posted. All right. So the next one I have in here is, okay, say I want to not just do ZPL, or say I don't really care about doing ZPL, I have an image I'd prefer to print. So I'm going to go ahead and copy this function and change that to print image. I'm going to remove that. And just to make it fun, I'm going to give the user the ability to open up a dialog and grab an image for themselves. Making sure I've got my stuff all set up here. I think that'll work. Yeah, that looks correct. We'll see. And I'm going to change my print helper print to, we're going to just print the image directly with the, I do have a path in here. I have to grab the path from the open file dialog. So basically, I'm opening up a dialog to allow the users to select a couple of different image file types. Once they've selected one, I'm going to grab that path from that and use that path in the Zebra printer object to print off the image. Pretty simple there. Let's just change my functionality up here at the top for the print button. And we'll go ahead and run this. All right. So it's asking me about that. I'm going to print a nice, wonderful Zebra printer head, Zebra head. And it prints off a wonderful Zebra head for you. Beautiful. I'm just going to print it again just because it's fun. There we go. Okay. So showing you in, without any ZPL or anything like that, you can print off an image pretty easily. There's a couple of different ways you can manipulate it. There's a couple of functions in the SDK where if you wanted to do some extra stuff, you could actually grab, you don't have to print it directly, but you can grab the string that is the converted image for other use cases. There's also a couple of functions to allow you to store the image on the printer for printing later. So there's a number of different functions within the SDK to allow you to do that kind of thing. This is just the very simple, okay, just shoot it down, print it as a single label, and you're good to go. But again, there's a lot of different ways to work with it and manipulate different images within, using the SDK with the printers. So that was pretty simple. And the last part that I wanted to show you guys was USB printing. And this is very similar functionality to if you're doing network printing or doing, even Bluetooth printing. With this instances, we've been essentially directly opening up a TCP connection using the IP address. A lot of times, you're going to want to give your users the ability to essentially, find what printers are in your area and, connect to one specifically that, that they know about and that they have access to, but don't necessarily have a, barcode to scan or something like that. Especially with a PC, you might not have access to that. So the ability to do what we call discovery is pretty important when it comes to working with the printers. I'm going to show you a basic discovery method for USB. In effect, when you're working with USB, the only way to really connect to a printer is actually to do discovery. There's no way to essentially open up a USB connection, directly, essentially because the different things like the virtual ports will sometimes change around, and some of the handlers for that do change over time depending on what the PC is doing. and might not be the same, all the time. So doing discovery allows you to essentially grab USB devices and parse through and figure out which one you want to use. So this is the a discovery method, and I'm going to add another thing in there for discovery, another reference. This is a basic one. In this one, all I'm going to do is just grab the last USB printer found, and this will only find Zebra printers because it is searching on the vendor ID for the USB. But I'm just going to grab the last one that it was able to find, which in theory should be this one here, but I got another printer hooked up, so we'll see if it prints over to that one. But this will just grab that. In most cases, you're going to want to give people a method to choose which printer they're going to do. But for certain stances for this session, I figured quicker just to just grab one and go with it. So that's my discovery method. And then again, I am going to just grab this method up here again. And I'm going to change this out. To remove that, and I'm going to remove that. And this time I'm going to grab a discovered printer from my Get USB printer here, and I'll change that out. It doesn't have the right function. Sorry, give me just a moment. There is another function that I've been using for connecting for the print helper if I've got a discovered printer, which I have to add to this. So we will add that right now. And I am pulling it from here. So this is a slightly different connect function where I'm using the discovered printer. The discovered printer already has a connection associated with it, so I'm going to grab that connection, use that to create the Zebra Printer Factory instance, open up the connection, and handle making sure that the connection has been opened. So I'm going to change this to print USB. So that is that particular connection function using the discovered printer rather than a directly open connection. Other than that, I'm not going to change a single thing in here. We're going to now use the USB connection in order to print. And right now it's going to just ignore the IP address. Actually, that's not going to work because I didn't change the function here. So we're going to change the function up there. And now it should ignore the IP address, but print over USB. And if you notice down here, it does give two strings. These are the USB, essentially file handles for the two USB printers that I currently have connected. This one up here is my GX printer that's sitting behind me. And this one here is the QLN that you're seeing on the video screen here. So it did pull both of these strings and through the discovery method, and then it connected up to the QLN 320 that I got sitting here. And went through and did the full status checking and printed through there. You can also open up a connection using The drivers, I'm not going to recommend it right now because it seems a little on the slow side to me. But if you only have the ability to, if you're concerned about not knowing if you're doing USB or network and you've got a situation where you need to use the drivers for whatever reason for the printers, then there is functionality built into this to be able to basically do the same kind of discovery search on the drivers and pull those as well. With a lot of the same, basically the same functionality as when you're doing a directly USB connected work or direct network connection work. But I found it's a little bit slower. So just something to keep in mind when you're actually working with this stuff. So that's actually everything I have to go through. I'm actually pretty quick this time. Wanted to put a call out there for more questions to see if anyone has anything they're concerned about or anything they'd like to see. We're also looking for ideas for more sample code to post. So let us know on the developer portal if you have any ideas for more sample code for this or any other SDK that we've got, as well as any other SDKs that you'd like to see us come out with in the future. We are actively looking for suggestions and ideas that we can help our developer community out with. So I'm going to give you guys just a minute and see if anything comes in. Wonderful, beautiful Wednesday in the Chicago area here. We've got gray skies and well under freezing temperatures. So expecting snow this afternoon. All right. If that's it, then have a wonderful, wonderful rest of your day, and we'll talk to you again in a couple of weeks. Thank you so much.